Vlog a day 584.
Morning. It's Tuesday, which means it's Wednesday for you, which means today is Writerly Wednesday, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about the production of Into the Nanten. When I talk about Into the Nanten, I am talking about these books. The art that you see on the walls around me, all the art that's in these books. There's like 180, 190 unique illustrations between these two books that I did not draw. And then there's the entire audio series as well. There was a whole team effort in this. So I thought today I would talk a little bit about working with artists a little bit and just the general production of Into the Nanten. We talked about it a little bit before, kind of the story of how it came to be and some things like that. So today, we're just going to dive a little bit deeper into that. Is part of the plan. And I just got some art from Nimit for Couriers, which is the Kickstarter that I'm going to be running hopefully soon. We're basically just waiting on Nimit at this point. So I need to give him some feedback, and I'll tell you guys how I go about doing that as well. Just, you know, how this whole process works in the art production side of things.
Oh, hey, babe.
Please don't talk about me when
I'm making good progress. Sadly, Natasha has canceled. She has a great reason to, but it's 2 days in a row that my lunch plans have gone out the window. So today, I don't know. But anyways, making progress on the Kickstarter for Couriers, and it's looking pretty good. I don't have the final color palette, so I'm not 100% sure what that's going to look like, but I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty sure we're going to launch it next Tuesday. That's my goal. It's all dependent on Nimit and getting the cover art, but I'm hoping next Tuesday. That's crazy, but I think we can do it.
Alrighty, making some good progress on this Kickstarter. Just need the final color palette. That's the main thing that I really need right now, aside from the artwork itself, but it's pretty exciting. So this is a semi-decent segue into the Nanten. But Into the Nanten, if you're unaware, billed as the world's first real-time fantasy blog. I'd been looking for something to do for a long time that was serial, that could grow over time, that could hopefully grow an audience, and that would work also as a bit of a writing exercise, just to keep me writing, to force me to write, to keep it public, to keep it criticizable. It's very criticizable. And I've gone through a whole bunch of different ideas, iterations, thoughts, and then I finally landed on this one. So the pitch of Into the Nanten is that it's the world's first real-time fantasy blog, which is the idea that it's the journal of a warrior who's been exiled into the world's most hostile jungle in search of a man that he hates, who's exiled there 20 years before him. And as he writes each entry in his journal, it posts in real time on the blog. So if he writes in the morning, it posts in the morning. If he writes at night, it posts that night. If he doesn't write for a few days because he's running for his life, you don't hear from him for a few days. And that's how the blog unfolded. And then we printed them as books as well. Producing it was kind of its own mini exercise, like the writing process and actually having to keep writing, keep producing, keep making new entries and putting them out at the same time as then having to organize things with Nimit, the illustrator, and then later with Dennis, the voice actor who did the podcast version of it. And we did try to release it as a podcast so you could follow along with the audio entries every day as well. Turn it into more of a production and creative management job than it was purely a writing exercise, which is really good. And I'm really proud of what we came up with. I think that overall the product was really strong and definitely looks good, sounds good, but it did take a lot of work for sure.
honey, though our friendship ceases from now on.
On a daily basis, what it looked like was trying to write or refine what I'd already written. I didn't write every day. I tried to write in batches, especially when I was on airplanes, because this was when I was a consultant with electronic medical records in the middle of the country. So I was actually spending a lot of time on airplanes, which is the perfect time to write because you couldn't really do much else. So I would try to get, 2 or 3 done in a day at least, so that if I was productive for like a week, it meant that I could get close to a month's output done, at least in a first draft. And then I would go back through and revise them. And the tricky part was having to have it well enough revised and set that it could serve as the appropriate inspiration for Nimit's work, because I would send it out to Nimit. I tried to keep a couple months ahead, and then was hopeful that he would stay at least a few weeks ahead, if not a month ahead as well. But she pretty much never did, and we were always down to the wire on the illustrations. The nice thing was some of the illustrations were able to fit in on different days. Like, they didn't necessarily have to fit in with a particular day, but most of them did. They very much had to be on time, and on point, which made it a little bit challenging sometimes. There were only a few that I ever had to flat out reject, some that definitely needed reworking, but for the most part, Nimitz really got into it, and I feel like he really channeled the sense of the story very well, so that he ended up representing an aspect of it that wouldn't have existed without him. So he added a lot. It wasn't just illustrating what you were seeing, but really illustrating what the character was feeling. Getting very close on this Kickstarter campaign, feeling good about it. I'm thinking that I'm gonna launch next Tuesday, so go ahead and pencil that into your calendar if you're interested. What I'll do on Patreon too is I'm gonna put the preview link up as soon as I have the artwork from Nimitz, or at least close enough to put in some temporary artwork from Nimitz in there, because I'd love to get your opinion on it, get your thoughts before we launch, and that way you can also save it, just mark it down, because the preview link works as a permanent link later as well, which is handy. Anywho, on Into the Nanten, one of the hardest things for any writer, well at least for me, is remaining disciplined and actually writing every day. And that was another thing that I wanted to set myself up for, was a requirement that I had to write. If I was supposed to be publishing or releasing something every day, there was only so much buffer that I had at any given point, and only so much of a break that I could ever take. I didn't want it to be something ridiculous where I literally had to write every day or I fell on my face, but by producing something every day, it meant you had to be writing in advance, you had to be, hold on a second. At least he's going the other way, that's handy. The river's back up another few feet. Borderline flooding over the banks on there, over that side again too. Very messy. So then Into the Nanten was a way of forcing myself to just keep writing. Like right now, I'm not really writing very much. I'm focused on other projects, whether it's Instant Freebie or my own Kickstarter, obviously my vlog. They're never things that I'm trying to get out of the way so I can carve out more time to dedicate to writing. But if I had that pressure of having to produce something, it would make me write. Every night or every morning, whenever I had some spare time, I would be writing something. And so that's one of the benefits of having yourself tied to a project like Into the Nanten, is that you've just got to write to keep it going. The downside, of course, is that it means you're not gonna have as much time for revision. You're not gonna be able to make it quite as polished. You can't really go back and make the alterations you might want to later because you've dedicated yourself to it in a pretty serious way. But at the same time, it was so good for me to just continue to write. At some point, you've just got to let your writing go, let the world and see it, hopefully enjoy it. And if nothing else, my goal is to, write my million words. I'm just trying to write so many words that eventually I'm naturally a good writer, or at least so that eventually through the discipline of writing all the time, become a significantly better writer. None of us are born good writers. It's something that comes over time. As for actually working with Nimitz, whose work I adore, it was one of those things where every Monday when assuming there was fresh work in the Dropbox every Monday, he would upload the latest entries there. We aimed for at least 3 a week, and I would just kind of squeal whenever I opened that folder because it was always like, wow, I can't believe it. It was really fun. I gave him a lot of freedom. There were certain illustrations my direction was a little bit more limited, especially as time went on, because I tried to give him a lot of freedom to express what was going on within the story itself. But I would prioritize it. I would say, okay, these are 2 images that we absolutely have to have this week, and then here's some suggestions for other ones that you could do. If there was something specific that I really wanted to see in an illustration, I'd give that to him, and otherwise I often would just say, hey, here's the look and feel that I think we should capture from this entry or that entry, and we would go from there. By and large, I think we ended up with some really, really cool stuff. I would Photoshop it, put it into WordPress, create a header image out of it, and do all the various web things that I needed to do, and then I would get it up on the website, schedule it, and it would post at whatever time Marcellus was writing that day. And similarly with Dennis, we would, once we introduced audio into it and Dennis was the man, I found him through, I forget where I found him. I found him online somewhere. I found his voice, a sample of his work somewhere, and then was absolutely enthralled. I was like, this is perfect. He's got just a little bit of a South African twinge to it. He sounds like the deep, masculine adventurer type that I was going for. So he seemed like the perfect fit for the project. So I brought him in. He started out by bringing the first season completely to life, and then we started working on the second season, and he did that usually about 10 entries at a time. I would listen to those often. Actually, there was a laundromat in Springfield, Illinois when I was working as a consultant, again, where I would sit and listen while I did my laundry, make notes, and send those to him when I got back to the internet. So it was one of those things where I was working full time in a job where I was also traveling like 20 hours a week on airplanes every 3 days, and just had to find time whenever I could to sit down, make notes, and send it. And honestly, because I don't listen to audio that much, that was a little bit more of a struggle for me, because sitting down and listening to all the audio, making notes about pronunciations, inflections, emotion, that kind of stuff, wasn't really my favorite task within getting the job done, but it was definitely necessary. And the end product, I also think there was pretty phenomenal. And as time went on, he just naturally picked up the character that much more and needed less and less direction. And I would just listen to make sure that there weren't any mistakes. And you could see that in the notes. They got less and less detailed over time. And eventually it was like, yep, this is good. Yep, this is good. Yep, this is good. And Dennis just did a wonderful job of the audio there as well. I remember when I went on my first big successful diet. I was in Springfield, Illinois. I was working on Into the Nanten, and basically my schedule looked like get up in the morning, like 7 in the morning or something, stumble to work, sit in a windowless box all day because we really weren't doing much. I often worked on Into the Nanten while I was there, or actually on the second Kickstarter that I ran that would ultimately fail. I did a lot of the prep and design work for that while on the clock at that job because they literally had nothing for us to do. Then in the evening, I would go work out. I would lift and do gym type stuff for about 45 minutes, and then I'd go run for about 45 minutes. I was running like 6 or 7 miles a day. This is while I was dieting, so I was kind of also miserable, just like I was pretty hardcore about it, and I was bored. It's so much harder to stick to a diet when you're bored. All you can think about is how hungry you are. You've got no distractions. And then work for a few hours on, posting Into the Nanten, making edits, making changes, whatever I needed to do. If I was going to the laundromat, that was often when I would work on the audio stuff, leave notes for Nimit, revise whatever I was working on, maybe take some time to write, and just post and schedule stuff for WordPress, for Twitter, for all the stuff that was going on all at once. That's kind of what a day in the life looked like. And then on travel days, I would try to write while I was actually on the airplane, but of course you had to drive for a few hours to get to the airport, and travel days are pretty bummed. Actually, the day after travel days are usually when you're the most bummed out.
The actual production of Into the Nanten, it's kind of crazy, but ultimately in the end, these 2 paperbacks were the result. A lot of fun to produce, a lot of fun to make. I print these through Lightning Source. They do a lot of really good, it's high quality printing, but it's print on demand, which means they only print them when you actually order one. So Amazon and a couple others will order these in bulk, but the majority get ordered when you actually buy them, and then they get individually packaged and shipped straight to you. So there aren't a whole lot of these actually sitting around waiting to be shipped because they're just waiting on a printer, if you know what I mean. The dream, of course, is to do some bigger things with these down the line. I would really hope to, produce these in a way that I think is a little bit of a nicer format. But until then, these are still pretty sick. And of course, the big leather-bound journals, which I've shown you before, and I've handmade a handful of those, and I will make sure to link to that as well. The whole process I wanted it to be immersive. So some of the other things that we did, like on Patreon, back when my Patreon was geared more towards writing, there were letters of the co-conspirators behind the scenes that had arranged for the main character's exile. They were writing to each other back and forth, so you got to see some of their kind of coded language about what was going on, get a little bit of a sense of a bigger picture of what's going on behind the scenes. There was a physical letter that got written. Let's see. This is an example of the letter that got sent to backers of the Kickstarter, a little bit of mud splatter on it and everything. I hand tore these out. Like I tore these out and crinkled them up and rolled them up and shipped them so that they look and feel like they've been smuggled out of prison. It's that kind of stuff that I really wanted to do for Into the Nanten because I wanted it to feel like this is a real thing that's happening right now. I want to be a part of it. That was ultimately the goal. That was Into the Nanten, was this whole big thing. And there's a third journal that I'm looking forward to writing someday and introducing into the world as well. I have a couple of fans who are very hardcore about me getting back to it. And I would like to get back to it at some point, but I'm just kind of waiting. And I have some plans as well because I think there's some really fun meta stuff that we could do with it that's also immersive, and the timing of the release of that could play very well into that. So I'm kind of holding on to it as well. Not to mention that it's an extremely expensive project. I mean, paying for all the artwork that went into this, as well as, paying for the audio later,
cost a lot of money that I don't have right now. But in the future, I'm hoping that it's something that we can revisit, and I'm hoping that we can do it in a really, really fun and exciting way, including like some of the high-level rewards where that you would get yourself illustrated into the story by Nimitz so that you could actually be one of the characters. But future thoughts on Into the Nanten, as well as some stuff that I've never talked about, would be that I think that before doing the third journal, I would like to go back and revise the story. I think it'd be really, really good because it's already out there, it's already been enjoyed. I think it'd be good to go back through, not to do an overhaul, but to add a few little things. And I think there's a good way of actually doing that in a way that plays into the story as well, keeping it fairly meta, because it's also canon, like it's in the world. Something like Into the Nanten, much like Agnar's Box, exists within my world because it's written by a character within my world. Whatever's written in here is actually important as well to the history and to the characters in my world because they can read it, reference it, and it has its own effects on what goes on behind the scenes. So I think it's actually really, really important that this is done well and is made available to my characters in my world in the best way possible, in the same way that it's made available to you in the best way possible. If you haven't figured this out yet, I have a huge amount of stories that I want to tell in a massive world that spans epochs, at least, that spans multiple time frames, multiple eras of civilization, and I'm really, really excited to write all those stories and bring them all together so that ideally, if you read Into the Nanten or you read Shadows of the High Ridge or you read Dark Horse or Couriers or Agnar's Box or whatever it is you pick up, you can enjoy that as a story on its own, whether it's a standalone book or a trilogy, you can enjoy that as a chunk. But that if you do enjoy them and you keep reading them and you read all of them, that over time you actually get this really big sense of a really big story that all is going to culminate. There's a trilogy and a few other books that I have planned that I think will bring everything to a head, and you'll get this one massive climactic story for the entire universe that I'm creating that I think will be really enjoyable. I also only have I'm going to die probably in the next 50 years, so I don't have a lot of time left. I need to get to work. I have so many that I need to write, and I need to be a better writer. I need to keep growing, and I just need to be so much better at what I'm doing, and that's why I need to keep writing actively and keep putting books out and producing them. And I want to share them with you as we go. So I hope that, the next real opportunity to be a part of that is going to be with Couriers when we kickstart that, hopefully next week, like I said. And if you would like to be a part of that, I really would love to have you on board, because I think that getting that going and making it a community thing and rolling with it and just kind of seeing where it goes, I'm just really excited, and I want to make sure that my writing is a bigger part of my vlog, that my world is a bigger part of your world as well, just because they're going to be so intersected, and I want to make sure that I'm spending as much time as possible writing, and I want to share that excitement. And I can't share that excitement very easily with you if you don't know what's going on, and if you're not aware of the writing, and you're not aware of what I've been doing, and you're not actually invested. So I'm trying to work on that and build that up. Hope that makes sense. I think this is about to die, so I should probably plug it in.
Oh, honey, though our friendship ceases from now on, if you can't say